Hello and welcome to FRI3D tutorial. The first tutorial is the basic tutorial, which will cover some of the startup aspects of FRI and how to manipulate and set up a very simple and basic scene for doing a fire analysis. What you're seeing here is a screen which has FRI3D running. On the left side, there's two windows here, the compartment and the scenarios. On the bottom, the settings, which when selected will display the settings of each of these components in the compartment. The top is the toolbar, which has got the various tools like open, save, import tools, and the menu bar. Now let's start with something very basic and straightforward. In the compartment view, click on this options window. There's nothing here because there's no compartments. You select this compartment, right click on it, and click on new compartment. What that does is creates a new compartment, but it's not displayed. So for that, go here to the options box, select it. It gives a default name as fzone_1. Go in there and select it. Now you see a list of categories under each compartment. Now at this point, you can go ahead and save this file as an initial starting point. So I'm just going to go to the file menu, save as, and save something as basic.fri3d. Now let's start by doing a very simple analysis. The first thing any analysis needs is a boundary. And these boundaries are described under here on the left hand side. You select the boundaries, right click on it, and click on add boundary. What that does is create a default boundary which is of size 1 unit by 1 unit by 1 unit on each of the directions. FRI3D expects the units to be in meters, so any conversion which has to happen before you get this into FRI. Now you have 1 unit by 1 unit by 1 unit size box. Let's go ahead and resize it to our needs. For that, we use these tools up here. The top left is the selection tool. The one next to it is the move tool. The one is the rotate tool and the scale tool. You hardly ever need to use the rotate tool, so let's leave that aside. Now position wise, by default it's positioned at 0, 0, 0, which is right at the origin. The middle of it is. Perhaps we want to position just on the off side, on the positive side of things. And for that, we can go here just to make sure it's on the positive side of things. You click on the camera and you select the top view. What that does is reset your view to the top. Here are the manipulators to use in your 3D window. Alt button and right mouse click goes up and down, zooms in and out. Alt and middle mouse button pans the camera. We don't have the Alt left mouse button in the orthographic view because we only can see two views. For that, let's go back into the perspective view and click on the Alt button and click on the left mouse button and roll it around, and you can see the camera move. Alt middle mouse button, Alt and right mouse button. Alt middle mouse pans it. So we got it in view here. Let's go back to the top view, camera, top, and select this boundary, which is already selected in this case, so we can go back and select this again on the left. Go to the tools here and you see the manipulators appear. So each of the three axes are given a color, the red, the blue and the green. You move it here, perhaps you can move it here, and there it's roughly in the positive area. Now let's give it a size, and for size you can switch back to your perspective window. You go to the size tool here and you see a different manipulator appear. Now if you go here, click on the object is already selected, so if you click on the right mouse button, you see the scale parameters. Now let's give it different units here. So assume we want to create a box of about 10 units by 5 units by 10 units in each of the axes. So for example, in the red axis, left and right, I guess, give it 10. In this case, the Y, which is the green axis, it's a top down. Let's give it 5 meters. And let's give it on the blue axis another 10 meters here. And there's your box. Alt right mouse button moves it out, Alt middle mouse button pans it, and there it is in view. At this point you can go ahead and save this. Now we have a boundary. The next thing we need is perhaps a source, a fire source, for example. And you might also need some equipments in the room, so let's do that also. First, let's create an equipment in the room. For that, you click on equipments, right click on it, and you add an equipment. To rename this equipment, you click on it, you double click on it and call equipment 1. Maybe it's a pump, so let's call it pump 1. Now you notice that it doesn't have any three-dimensional geometry associated with it. By default, objects are created with no 3 dimensions in it. In order to make it come into view, you have to go ahead and get this mouse inside this area here right next to the red one, which is a wireframe indication of a box. You click on it and you bring it and drag it all the way in the 3D window and you place it over here. Now it places a box by default 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter and drops it in the area where you've released the mouse. Let's resize it a bit. Again, you go in here, go into this tool over here, click on it, and then you give it a certain direction. Say suppose you want to have it 2 meters by 1 meter by 2 meters. This is one equipment. Escape will get rid of this. Let's go ahead and save it again. Here. Now we have a box with one equipment. Let's go ahead and create a fire source. For that, we go to the simulation items, click on it, right click on it, and say add source. By default, it's called a fire source, F source 1. Go ahead and rename it by double clicking this and then typing a name, source 1, and enter. Now on the bottom are the parameters associated with the source 1. The first parameter, which is the most important parameter, would be the fire properties. Now what kind of a source this fire source is. This options box here will give you the different kinds of sources. Now FRI3D has taken the database from the National Fire Protection Association, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and has given a set of heat release rates for all kinds of fire sources which can potentially happen in a plant and a nuclear plant. We can select one of these and you see these parameters here changes. For example, the battery charger version 1 has got a peak heat release rate about 211 kilowatts at about 720 seconds since the start of the fire. Same thing goes on here. Perhaps this is a little bit higher of a peak release rate, and it's got a tabular column of solid and liquid fires. And you scroll all the way through and you see all the different kinds of fires. In the liquid fires, you have liquid fire sources, And for this, you notice that the heat release rates will be computed dynamically inside the program, that you don't need to specify. Now there's ways of, and let's go back to the solid again, there's ways of modifying these heat release rates. But for this initial demonstration, let's not worry about modifying any of it and assign one of them right away. And for that, you assign to select it here and you close it. Now we have a fire source with its fire properties. Now where is the fire source? The same procedure can be repeated. You click on this wire box, drag it all the way along and put it over here. And notice that it disappeared. All it means is it's hiding behind this box over here. For that, in order for it to be visible, this is already selected, go to the fire this positioning tool here, and you see this positioning handles appear. You can move this around, and there you see this fire appears from here. Now generally for a fire source, you might want to position at the top of the object. Now it's very difficult to see the top in a perspective 3D window, in spite of the fact that you keep moving this around. You have to move it multiple times in order for you to see it. FRI3D has got an option in which multiple views can be viewed in the 3D area here. And you see these toolbars over here, and perhaps we can select one of them, which is the top and the down one. Click on it, and the bottom window now shows a top-down view of the fire. And this is again the perspective window, the 3D viewport. Now you can see that this position of the fire source is a little bit outside, so let's go ahead and move one of this right inside here. And now we don't know where inside the box it is, so you want to position it a little bit higher. For that, you can just go here, go to the camera, and perhaps look at the left view here. Same idea, Alt middle mouse button brings it into here, and now you can again click it over here and bring it right on top here. Perhaps just leave it like that. Let's go ahead and save this. Now we're ready to run a very basic analysis. In CFast, which is a zone model, you click on the fire source, you go ahead and simulate the source, which is a button here, or you can click on it and right click and click on simulate here. Let's go ahead and do this. This is the name of a scenario. The scenario would contain an if case of what would happen if this is the fire source. So the scenario window here, after running this scenario, will give you a list of failures. So anything in the scenario would be what has failed due to that scenario. So let's go ahead and run this first, and I can go ahead and show you the scenario window after this. So right now we put the simulation time of 20 seconds, might be a little bit less. Let's put 400 seconds here. Let's go ahead and run it, and it's computing CFast by default. Now it's run the simulation, and you can see there is a triangle at the bottom. The triangle indicates where the failure has happened, at which point of time the failure has happened. Now we have overlapped the fire with the object, so the failure happens immediately. So when you click your mouse in here and move this around, you see there's a red outline around the box, and that means that equipment has failed right away because that's where the fire started. As you move this area here, you can see the color is changing, and that gives you an indication of what the temperature is. There is a sensor which is placed on the equipment, on any of these equipment closest to the fire source, and this temperature reading is the reading of that sensor in CFast, which is a device. You see the maximum temperature, which is red, goes about 98 degrees, and at some point of time it reaches 98 degrees here. So this is a very simple fire analysis with one equipment in here, and then the failures right away. Let's have a look at the scenario. When we switch to the scenario window, you can see that this is the scenario which is active right now, source_CFast. if you go ahead, click on the options box, these are the different other scenarios which are there. You see this F scenario 1 which is created, and that is a scenario which is created by default when you create a zone or a compartment, and that usually has a full room burnout, which means that everything in there has failed. In this simple scene we have only one equipment, so, and that also fails because that's a source. So these two scenarios are probably very similar. However, you can see that the source CFast is the result of the CFast simulation, and if you look at the equipments here, that's where the pump is, and that's the one which has failed. I'm going to go ahead and stop here to give a little bit of a chance to go over the various things of FRI3D, and I'll give you a bit of a summary of what we went through in this tutorial. So in this tutorial we started off with a blank slate with nothing in there. We created a compartment or a zone. We called it fzone_1 by default, and you can rename it again to anything you want by double clicking on it and renaming it. Zone 1. By default, another scenario was created as you created a zone which is associated with that compartment or a zone. Then we went ahead and created a boundary which describes the boundary of the simulation. We resized it to match some measurements. We then created an equipment called the pump. We then created a source, placed it on top of the pump, and gave it a certain fire property, in this case the battery charger 2. Then we went ahead and selected the source and ran a CFast zone model simulation for 400 seconds. And we noticed that the simulation results on the bottom timeline. This tutorial also had some brief mention about how you manipulate the camera, how to move around. But there is another tutorial which go over some of the basic UI elements of FRI3D. The link is below. I hope this gives you a very basic understanding of what FRI3D can do. And in successive tutorials, we'll go ahead and explain how to create raceways, trays, cables, perhaps run different simulations, how to set failure criteria, and perhaps add boundaries and go into more complex details. Thank you.